Welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for being here, Steve. I sure appreciate it.
This is pretty exciting.
Well, I'm glad you're excited for me and my 17 viewers.
That's all right. I mean, to take this jump takes a little guts.
You have to just start.
Yeah.
That's why, I think we planned it a little bit. We planned it and started thinking about all the things that we could do, Nicole specifically and I. And as we were starting to think, it's easy for that to get spun out of control because we have a lot of capabilities and we know we could do a lot of different things. We kind of tested out live streaming and we're thinking about these different things. And what we found was we were just not going to get started because we kept thinking, well, before we start, let's do a little bit more. Let's make this a little better. And finally, I said, you know what? Forget about live streaming for now. We'll get to that eventually. But right now, I just want to get content out there.
How long did the idea incubate and kind of grow? Like, when did you guys start thinking about it?
And we started thinking about it in the summer.
Okay.
Pretty seriously.
Right.
And then as the fall came around, I started getting really itchy about it.
Okay.
I started watching and listening to podcasts from long-form podcasts.
Right.
People like Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin and Joe Rogan and some of these other people who are doing these, these one-on-one types of things.
How often are they combining both video and audio? Is it mainly just the ones you're seeing?
All the stuff that I've been seeing is like this, where it is video. It's on YouTube.
Right.
It's on their YouTube channels, but they're basically in studios.
Right. Gotcha. Okay.
So you don't really need to watch the video. It adds a little bit.
Right.
Of personality.
That's typically how I do. I'm just listening.
But they all output podcasts. The same thing that they do on YouTube. The audio is on iTunes. So. Gotcha. When I'm out there, walking, exercising, stuff like that, or if I'm driving long distances, that's what I listen
onto.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. So as I started doing that, regardless of what you think about all those different people, I listen to people who have lots of different political views from one side to the other, but mainly kind of synthesizing the things that they're doing that I think are being well received.
Right.
is just having conversations and allowing people to come in and say what they think.
Right.
And sometimes challenging them, but doing it in a way where it continues to be a conversation. Right. And people walk away from it going, yeah, I learned something from that other person, or I learned a little bit more about who they actually are, because so many of the things that we do today are subject to 5 minutes or less. Right. A lot of it's 30-second or 1 minute sound bites. Right. And working in media now, like I am, I'm really becoming hypersensitive to that. How much information can you get out in 30 seconds? Right. Not much.
It's a challenge.
Right. And usually my conversations with media will last somewhere in the realm of 4 or 5 minutes.
Right.
And then they rifle that down to I might only get, on camera for 10 seconds.
But it's just so much more powerful to listen to this and to get the conversation and to, even if there is some back and forth, you really... Yeah. And even if you disagree, I mean, given that conversation.
You can get down into it, and you can get context for why it is the person thinks what they think. Right. Because sometimes people can say some things that sound pretty outrageous. Right. But then when you dig down into why they think what they think, all of a sudden you're like, well, that actually doesn't. I still don't agree with it, but at least it's reasonable. Like at least they've had a thought process that's brought them there, or a culture or a background that's brought them to that place, and you can kind of get at least some understanding, some simpatico.
Well, you can take it another step. I mean, you give that conversation, you can go that next step, and that 30-second soundbite, whatever you're getting there can be so short. You can't really play. You can't go further with it, really. But with that conversation and you're listening and whatever they're talking about, you can take that a little further. Yeah. Follow up with them.
Exactly. And hopefully, for me, this should be, we're on Community Conversations, by the way. I've announced this is Steve Trotter. He's the principal of Cordelia Hills Elementary School here. proud principal, and many people are proud to have you as the principal.
Well, I'm excited to be here.
We're very excited to have you, not only here on the show, but in the school district, and which, you know, this is what I do each time.
It's all sitting over there.
Just reminds me, you know, Steve is already ready for this. But I have got to take the tie off and signify that we are outside of work hours.
Yes.
The things that we say, the opinions that are expressed are our own opinions and not necessarily the opinions of the Fairfield-Suisun Unified School District. Although some of them may be.
Yes.
I mean, who knows? But we are not going to say that is the case.
The tie is off.
The tie is off.
Yes.
We're now in community conversations mode. And so it can sort of continuing our conversation, right? I think this process goes on multiple levels for me. I mean, it's an opportunity, even though not sponsored by the school district. For me personally, it's an opportunity to help the school district.
Right.
I get to see every day what great leaders and staff that we have in our school district. I'm behind closed doors talking to them. Right. I know what their hearts are.
Right.
And so often people who don't get to see that part of the decision-making process misunderstand the decisions that are made and think that there's malintent there or that maybe we're just silly, dumb people. And I want to kind of help, you know. I want, and that goes for not only the district, but I think it goes for the community as well. All the community leaders.
Well, I just all these community leaders, I really think, are a reflection of the greater community, and I think there's a lot of good things going on, great things going on in the community, and I think those leaders are a reflection of that, and they really shine a light on the best parts of that, and so that's. For me, just being in Fairfield-Suisun and living here for so long and now working in town, I came here to work because I was living here and really just seeing all the great things that were going on, not just in the school district, but in the community, and now being able to be a leader in that, in the thick of it. You're right. I mean, there's definitely decisions that are made or things that happen that are not going to please everybody, but they're really rooted in the great people that live here and go to school here. And so I'm excited about this project because it's really going to shine the best light on not just the school district, but I think everybody working hard for our school, for all of our community.
I agree, and I hope it extends out. I know that I have a responsibility to try to cover as much of Solano County, which is the area that I say that I'm covering.
Right.
But the reality is many of the people that I associate with are here in Fairfield, and so. That's kind of where I'm starting, and I don't know if I've said this before, I think, but there's a method to the madness. The beginning is to get comfortable, to find out, what I can do in this format. Every time I watch these videos after I do them, I pick on myself. I'm learning. I'm learning how to do this.
Right.
So in many ways, while this is a macro project, it's something that I hope will help on a large level. It's also a micro project. It's a project that really helps me personally become a better person, make connections. I tend to be a person who goes home from work every day, and while I'm involved in a lot of things, church and other things community-wise, for the most part, I'm a homebody with my family, and so I'm not one to go out for drinks after work with people and that sort of thing. Number one, I don't drink alcohol, but I'm a deacon at a Southern Baptist church. Sorry, that's just part of. But and I try not to make people around me feel guilty about that when they are, because I understand. But at the same time, it's just not something I typically do. So this project gives me an opportunity from a personal standpoint to do something I actually really love to do, which is to sit down and just talk to people, just talk with friends, Right. And this sort of gives me an excuse to be able to say, for 2 hours a week, I'm on a Tuesday, I'm going to chat with I'm going to get somebody to come in and talk.
Without all of that, obviously it's always, the job and the church and all that's kind of it's always there, but just to chat and just have a conversation.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, actually. It's a really, really nice thing.
So a lot more of it. It could spread like wildfire.
It could. Yes. Maybe it could. Yeah. And people, what's interesting, what I think I've noticed, what's really sort of sparked me to start really doing this, is that in watching some of those other long form podcasts, they have a lot of viewers, and people are becoming, or at least a certain section of people are becoming very interested in watching and participating in those more long form conversations. Because it is deeper than what they get on TV and even on your typical YouTube and. Well,
and I find it's interesting, the people that I find, the friends that I have that are huge podcast people. Often they're not even watching the video; they're just listening while they run, or like you said, driving. They really developed into great conversationalists, and you could just talk to them forever. It's some of the best times I've had is just talking to those people that find rich conversation so rewarding, and so it's interesting, as opposed to that really snippet where you delve down in the comment section of a post, and then it's like, and that's not really healthy conversation in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
it's kind of scary in a way.
It's super not healthy.
It's really, don't look at the comments.
And as somebody who lives in those comments, on Facebook and that sort of thing, part of my role and Nicole's role is to address those comments.
And often I see those, especially if you're looking at Nicole, and she pops in and says, "Hey, why don't you just reach out?" And often things are solved so quickly in just that conversation, and when you can kind of humanize, like, as opposed to the comment section, you just humanize it.
I think keeping it there in that comment section is a huge mistake most of the time, right? So it's that's where you get alerted to the issue, right? And then you can engage with the person, but the goal really is to get them off of there and to get them to a place where you can have a real conversation. Humanize, like you said, and then solve the problem, or at least get them to a place where they can understand where we are,
and build, and I think if you, it's just just in life in general, but as a school administrator, if you've really focused on healthy relationships and building capacity, and really reaching out and getting to know your community as much as possible, you kind of avoid some of those things in the first place. And unfortunately, it gets there. But then once you could start that that relationship building, the conversation, you kind of get out of that bad dark place pretty fast and get back to something pretty positive and healthy.
That kind of building is an investment that does pay off over the long term for sure.
Right.
So how long ago did you start at Cordelia Hills?
This is my third year there.
So you're 2.5 years in.
Yep.
Now,
2.5 years.
I can't believe it's December. This is crazy.
It is so fast.
Yeah. So 2.5 years in, and you came from what school district?
So I was in John Swett Unified, which is
right across the water.
Right across the water. I say to people, John Swett Unified, and they have no idea. So then I say Crockett, and they're still kind of, and I say the Dead Fish, the restaurant, and then they're, I know where that's at. So yeah, and that's actually where I grew up. I was there. Since a little tyke, I started kindergarten and 4th grade and just went all the way through the schools in the district. And then I was student teaching all the way out in Daly City. And I got a call to come, be at the high school, to come interview for the high school, and got the job there. And then taught high school. Elementary kids, like lots of germs. Like you're just thinking, and you think of, you hear a lot about elementary school teachers that they know little kids, but in terms of knowing subject matter or content or teaching, that they're not great. And so it was like that last frontier. Like I would never go there. Like high school students are great. You know your content. And then my wife she lost her job. So we were preparing to move to Los Angeles. She got another job there. And so I was going to leave the district, leave where I grew up. And then the superintendent at the time, good guy, great guy, he offered me a job at the elementary school. And so I just jumped at it, and I stayed in town in Fairfield. We already lived in Fairfield at that point with my 2 girls, and my wife moved to Los Angeles, Westwood, and worked there for a year and a half, and I stayed home, and it was my first year as an elementary school principal, and I loved it. Everything that was said about elementary schools and the teachers there was just completely wrong. They are fantastic and amazing human beings that are with kids for 6 hours a day. The same kids for 6 hours a day. In high school, you're there with them for an hour at the most, and then they move on. And you get a new group, and they're there. And not only are they great, with kids and loving these kids that they're with for 6 hours, but they're fantastic instructors. And you really, the ones I got to know, really know. When you're teaching math, let's say at elementary level, you really have to understand all of it to teach to teach it to young kids. You can't just understand that grade level, and so and same with language arts. I mean, you have to understand that writing process all the way through, and so they were some of the best teachers I've ever met, and I was there for 6 years, and I loved every moment of it. And then Cordelia Hills came open, and I did think it was time for a change. And I don't really know why. Like I go back to that, and it was just it was kind of a decision. I had some friends that live in the community, and they said, "Oh, this job's here. It's a great school. You should look at it." And so I applied, and then it's just kind of take. I don't know. You've started a new position, in the last couple of years, and everyone always asks me. I think the superintendent all the superintendents always ask me, what's your 5-year plan? And I'm not really good at those things. I'm just like, I'm showing up, and I'm going to kick butt today, and I'm going to love these kids and love my teachers. And I thought for a long time, I applied for school to get a doctorate, and I thought maybe a superintendent in the district I was in. But really, it's just a day-to-day, let's just wake up and love these kids. And so when the opportunity came, I interviewed, and I didn't feel like I did really well at all.
Really?
I didn't. I thought it just was like, I went home and I'm like, that was horrible.
How
and so
funny.
I think the HR called and like, hey, we'd love for you to come in and meet the superintendent. And then, you come in and there's like this, I don't know if you've been through this process, but it's a little nerve wracking. Like it's kind of like the CIA. Like you go through all these back corridors up there, and then you appear in this office you've never seen. And it's a beautiful, place, and it was a conversation. Yeah. That's what was so great about that.
The second interview
is it's a conversation with a human that, loves kids and loves schools and is really passionate about it. Mm-hmm. And so when you kind of get on that wavelength about that passion, and then you just go, and you're really just having a conversation. And I felt great about that.
Okay.
And I got in the car, and my current boss, she called, and in that moment, I didn't even think about it. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. Huh. And I haven't looked back. I had heart surgery, as you know.
I want to get into this a little bit. I'll just share one thing with you. Number one, and with whoever, 17 watchers. Hey, 17 watchers. Hey, it was, last week it was 2. So
right. Hey, I'm telling you now. I'll get my daughters on it. It'll be good.
So the funny thing is, it was funny when you're talking about attitudes are terrible and everything. Yeah. Well, I was working here. I've been working here for 8 years.
Right.
And I remember, and it may have been after the second interview, I'm not sure, but I remember there was talk about you.
Me?
Oh yeah. Coming in, and people were very excited who had interviewed you, and really felt like you were a gem, and that you were somebody that was going to do really well, and you have. So I don't know, like maybe that was, but it's funny how you kind of criticize yourself.
Yeah,
you think I didn't do very well, but
we'll do this later when we're looking at it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But it was, from as far as my view is, everything I had heard from beginning, everybody was really excited, and I was excited because I think you were the first person, definitely the first principal that we had hired who, before you got hired, I knew who you were on Twitter.
Oh my God.
So for all of you who are out there on Twitter,
yes.
it's at Principal Trots.
It is.
It's his Twitter handle.
And it could be a little unhealthy. I'm going to be honest.
It's a little unhealthy sometimes. But in a healthy way, because you run a lot. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. But I think it's interesting because that was at a time when not a lot of people were. I mean, the Twitter was really burgeoning at that time for our district, and now it's just this huge thing.
It was exciting for a Twitter user to come from a district. No offense. I mean, it's probably the reality it was for this district and many districts where it's not. There's no community around that, you know.
Right.
And that's what's been so much more exciting here. Is it's not even. You know, I think this district does a good job of using it as a tool to, celebrate the district. But in a district this large with so many schools and so many people, I have relationships with people. I don't even really see that often, and it's all because of Twitter.
But it's ongoing.
It's ongoing,
and that's
every day.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it. I think most really good relationships don't start via social media, but they continue. So they're really well fostered.
Right.
So you have opportunities to have meetings with people and stuff like that. You meet them once, but then you connect up with them on Twitter and you can continue that once you've actually had some real interaction.
Right.
And it is kind of creating some nice glue in our district between people.
Well, and I think what you find too, and I think, this district didn't know it was doing it, but, I had been on Twitter for a long time and had never really tweeted, maybe had retweeted a lot, but then seeing some of the people in this district, some of the early adopters, especially teachers at my own daughter's school that just were tweeting and talking about a lot of the exciting things. Even as a principal, you don't get to spend a lot of time at your own child's school because you're at school. But just to see their work they were doing on Twitter allowed me, then it opened a window to wow, they're doing some really cool things here. Let's go check out some of these classrooms. And then you really open your eyes. And so then it just kind of, in a lot of ways, Twitter is one of the many reasons I'm here in the district. Yeah, in a weird way. So
it is in a weird way, and I've gotten to see it from the beginning because I think I was probably the first administrator in the school district on Twitter
with it. Wow,
that was using it quite a bit. In fact, I found an old presentation recently. A really old Google presentation that I had done a number of times at the beginning of the school year and at staff meetings for schools in our district, talking about why you should be on Twitter as an educator. And then to see the growth of it, how it's just taken on its own life, and that people are, I'm catching people all the time who either follow me or I see a bunch of. One of the things that I love now is that Twitter tells you when a bunch of your friends follow this.
Right. Which, or when you scroll down from, I don't know. Here are the educators.
You catch all these people who I didn't even know are on Twitter and in our district. Then I verify, yep, they are a staff member. They're at this school, and then I follow them, and then I put them on my list. And I have like 400 some odd people on our list on the FSUSD list. But my guess is we're probably more in the range of 700 or 800 at least. It's pretty amazing.
Well, and not just our. I mean, I think we have a little community within the larger Twitter community, but education is just. I mean, I'll tell you, as I was preparing to go here, I left a staff meeting and I was texting a few. I was like, oh, that presentation totally bombed. That traditional model of this staff meeting in the afternoon when everyone's tired and you're trying to get them collaborate. It's just but Twitter, there's just so much learning that goes on there, and so much growth, and so much connectivity in a really positive way that just kind of is so much better than what we've traditionally done in schools. Around growth and collaboration and supporting each other. So.
And for people who don't use Twitter, I think it's hard for them to understand because I know it was for me when I started. I didn't get it at all. Somebody told me I should be on there, and I was like, dude, Twitter's the place where Justin Bieber says what he's having for lunch.
Right. And people eat it a lot.
Not interested.
Tim,
right?
you can tweet what you're having for dinner, and I'd be excited. You can go there.
I could,
Yes.
but you know what? If I did, I would definitely include a well-framed picture, and it would probably follow up with some very excited Bitmojis.
Yes, there you go.
and some moving gifs that really explain how I'm feeling.
Did you? GIFs, right?
I say GIF.
GIF.
Some people say GIF. I know.
No, that's wrong.
GIF. It's GIF. Yeah.
GIF.
Thank you. Yes. I'm so glad we agree.
Excited. Yes. This is so exciting.
That was probably picked up by the mic.
You got that, Jeff?
So yeah, so for people who are not on Twitter, that's fine. And yes, probably the majority of the stuff that happens on Twitter is maybe not that healthy,
right,
and kind of weird. And there's a lot of entertainment stuff on there, right, whatever, and news. But for educators, there continues to be and has been for at least 5-6 years, right, this really great subcurrent that's very positive, right, and I've described it like following the right people on Twitter and engaging with them is like being in a master's level class all the time, of any number of different things. At the time, I think it was ed tech, right, but really now it's branched out into all these different areas of education, and people are talking about all kinds of things and really pushing each other. It's a wonderful thing. So if you're an educator and you're not on Twitter, you should get on Twitter and then and literally follow a couple of people. Follow us and then say, who should we follow? And then we'll just bombard you with all these people that you need to follow. And then it's, I usually say follow John Carippo, follow Jay Carippo, and take the red pill. Yeah. That's what I say.
There may have been some John Carippo references this afternoon.
Yeah, because he will take you to some places that you're like, I don't know about this. It's not my comfort zone.
He'll always respond. Yeah.
Right. This is where you want to be every day. If you want to push yourself, you want to be in a place every day where you do something and you go,
Basketball Twitter is pretty heated too.
Basketball Twitter. Oh, okay, Warriors Twitter.
Yeah.
They're pretty strong. The Warriors do have strong Twitterish.
Yes.
And I think that some of their players are pretty have really done that, right?
Katie has a few.
Not only players, but players' wives and all kinds of people.
Players have sub accounts that troll accounts, and it's pretty.
And coaches even. Yeah. I mean, they're all in it. So I really, one of the things that you're really known for, at least at current, is the movement around FSUSD runs this, which is a hashtag on Twitter, but is also, becoming this sort of thing that involves a lot of different things in our district. It involves a physical aspect, the obvious physical aspect, but really there's some other undercurrents to FSUSD runs this as well. and I want to get into that. I want you to kind of explain it from your perspective, but also weave in right before you came here, you had a pretty major heart issue.
I did, yeah.
And running is strongly connected to that, I understand, right? So tell us about how that kind of came about.
Well, so it's a weird story, but I heart surgery when I was little, tetralogy, and had that corrected and was going on a regular basis, and then just stopped going, feeling fine, feeling healthy, and then I guess probably 4 years ago, I just went for a run, and I really enjoyed it. Actually, that's a lie. I didn't really enjoy it. I hated it, but I said, well, I need to get healthy. I'm overweight, and I at one point was like 280 pounds and just wasn't really happy, wasn't exercising.
You were 280 pounds?
288 pounds to be exact, yeah. Wow. It's a big boy. Love to eat, still love to eat, but just really wasn't healthy. But went for a run, and then went for a run the next day, and then went for a run for the next day, and then it turned into 381 days in a row where I ran at least a mile. And in that, though, I don't know if you know a lot about running, but you messed your toes up. So I messed my toe up. I don't really remember how exactly, but it was somehow related to the running. So I went to have the toe checked, and the doctor said, there's nothing we could do for that toe. And I was like, no, that's not true. And she's like, no, it's true. Nothing we can do for your toe. It's just going to look like that forever. So I said, well, why I'm here in the doctor's, I hadn't had a heart checkup in a long time. So one thing led to another. And, well, we're seeing something in these tests. We want you to go have some more tests. And that led to more tests. This led to an MRI, which just eventually it ended up with, we're going to need to have surgery, do some corrective open heart surgery, the full thing. And so, a couple of things from that, you really learn that you're surrounded by a really supportive, not just family, but supportive school community at the time when I was still in Rodeo. Incredibly supportive. Like, I can't even tell you. You always feel support, but when you are going through something so large, and when you really don't even miss school that often, you're going to miss 3 months. It's major surgery. People, you really feel loved and supported. So anyways, went through that. The streak had to end, which was really hard. But after 2 months, started running again, and really kind of took this on as like, I'm going to really kind of take on this persona as a runner, and I'm going to beat heart surgery if such a thing exists. But so I ran for 750 days. And then I had to get a pacemaker.
No way.
So I have a little pacemaker here. It's really weird. When you were talking about tasing last week, it was a little scary that I was going to come here and tasing. Like, probably not a good idea.
I was thinking about you too.
Yeah, I was like, so I have a little pacemaker here.
Doesn't want to get tased.
It does not want to get tased. I don't want to go through the metal detector or anything. So I started a new streak, and it's for a person that just really hated running and hated, in general, exercise, like play basketball, whatever, but it's kind of really transformed who I am, and I really believe that anybody could run, and anybody could do, I see people, on my runs, I see people, there's a lady that runs in Fairfield, that she runs with a cane, and she's barely moving at pace, but she's out there. I see her almost every day, and so, and people always say, how do you run? And I just put on my shoes and I just go. I've run in my suit. I've run with the work shoes on. I've run at nighttime. I know you don't partake in alcohol, but I've run having some alcohol. Like, I've done it all. But you can't, and that's the thing is that I can't miss a day. And people say, what about your knees? And I went to 288 pounds to being here, and this is what's done it for me. And whatever, people take on they do different things to get to those places, but for me it's running, and I'm committed, and now I don't know where I'm at. I'm almost at 200 days again, and I have to get a new battery in 10 years, apparently, for this thing, so I'm sure at some point the streak will end again. Yeah. But I'm determined to go as long as I can, and so that's kind of the two have melded. The toe caused the heart surgery, which then caused me to just really be dedicated to improving my health and the health of anybody else. And my kids are really super healthy and they exercise. My wife she's out of her gourd. She lifts and she can bench press and do all these crazy swim, the whole 9 yards. But I never saw myself as kind of a exerciser, a healthy person. And now I just put on my shoes and I run, every day. And when I came here, it wasn't the thing that I expected.
I mean, how far is a minimum? A minimum is a mile.
And what's great is I have determined wherever I'm at exactly. I could tell you to the step where a mile is from. If I go down the street,
you have it mapped off.
At the district office, in Cordelia, like everywhere, I could tell you where, because you never know when you're going to get that mile.
That's interesting.
And most, this year with the pacemaker, I was ramping up for a marathon in April. And when she said, you're going to get a pacemaker and we don't want you to run this marathon right now, I was like, ugh. Shout out to Shereen Choi. She ran the marathon for me, not having trained at all. She ran that marathon for me. She had the bib. It said Steve Trotter on it. so she ran that wow. But it's kind of, once I got back on the streak, it's been hard to kind of ramp back up again. And I was supposed to do a marathon this last weekend that a few people in the district did and did fantastic. A couple of the principals in the district did it and a couple of the teachers. And I just wasn't ready. And so that's been the hard part is I've consistent with the mile, but how do you kind of get back into it after, a pacemaker? And so it's at least a mile. Since I've started, I've done up to 1,500 miles in a year. So, it grows. But at the base, it's always a mile.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems doable.
It does. And to tell you before, another Solano County resident who still teaches in John Sweat Unified PE, and he lives in Solano County, Ron Spinney. He would have us run a mile when he taught me, and then when I started teaching, I taught PE also. So he taught me, and then we worked together as PE teachers for a little while. I hated the mile. The mile run was like the worst. I probably got a B in PE because I didn't run the mile very fast, and it was literally like a 13, 14-minute mile.
Yeah.
I hated it.
You're almost walking.
But, right. It's amazing. That's the point. It's faster than
I can walk fast.
Right. But now a mile, it's totally doable. And anybody really can do that. And you don't need to be a run streaker. It is really hard on your body. And but for me, it's just a commitment. It's really more than the running itself. It's a commitment every day. My kids, for a long time, it was like, you're going to go for a run? Really? And now they're just like, can you just go get your run done with? Can you just get it over with? So
what is then in that vein, you said it's more than just running.
Yeah.
Right? So obviously, you've lost a bunch of weight. That's good for you.
Right.
But there's got to be mental impacts on how you think, on your attitude, on your emotions.
It's when I'm in that mode of running. And I go back and forth between having music, not having music, having my phone with me, not having my phone with me. But it's just my opportunity. It's at least a minimum. I'm not a fast runner. So minimum, like even if I'm running really fast, it's at 8.5 minutes minimum of just my time. And if I want to be mindless, I just want to listen to the pounding on the pavement, or if I have a lot on my mind, it's been a tough day at work, or the Warriors lost or something, or whatever it is, or the kids are upset about something, whatever it is, it's my time just to be alone and to be in my thoughts. And often you're running more than a mile, so it could be an hour, 2 hours of time just to be free. And I really when I take off from the house, it's exhilarating for me. And some of the runs are really hard, and you're in your mind, you're counting down how many more, or you have a goal and you have to kind of shut that down and just go home. But really, it's really a mental state. It's a lifestyle. It's a lot of funky clothes and shirts that you have, for running. It's a lot more laundry. But for me, and really what it's helped me do too is build a lot of relationships and have a lot of great conversations.
Yeah.
I've
seen that. You've made connections.
I've made connections. People with. There's hundreds of people I follow, let's say on Instagram or Twitter, that ran in the CIM in Sacramento. Never met them. I have a friend that's in Kansas that is a run streaker. I'll never meet her. I'll never touch bases with her, but that's our connection is through running. People that are all the way in Massachusetts, people in Australia, just that, and it's all connection around running. You think educators are crazy, and that's a community going to running, and people are just, but they're inspiring, and it's real too. There's a lot of accounts that are just that, that the bridge and the shining sun and the feet, but a lot of it is just that real, how difficult it is to be a runner. And so there's a real community in that. And so in that sense, I've got, it's also an outlet away from school too.
Yeah. Well, and the busyness and,
right.
I think there's definitely something to having every day an opportunity and an excuse and a sort of a standard way that you unplug and you have that sort of focused time on your own thoughts where you're learning.
Right. And a lot of people, if you're just talking about fitness, and I don't want to pretend to be some fitness guru or not. I just run. It's probably actually fitness wise, not the healthiest thing. There's other things that, you probably could do, but people always ask questions specific to running. What do you do for this? What do you do? Yeah, I just put my shoes on and I just go. I just go, and that's what I always just tell people, just go. Whether it's lifting or swimming or walking or whatever it is, you just got to go do it and just get out. And so
I think that characterizes a lot of what's happening right now in our schools, in our school district, is people are starting to get the sense that it's time to shed some of this stuff that we've been shackled with in schools for a while. And it's time to just go. And move forward some of the things that we know today to be good for kids. And also move forward personally with some things that we're passionate about or interested in. And I mean, that's sort of what we were talking about. What this is for me is a just go. Part of the reason why I said this is not going to be sponsored by the school district, although I love my job and I love the school district, and I hope that it benefits the school district, is, I don't have to ask anybody to do this. And there's no, sometimes, having to ask, sometimes having to build consensus and check with everybody who, might have a say in that thing that you're trying to affect is difficult. And it's always challenging, but it's nice to have something that I can say, I believe that this is a good thing to do. And so I'm just going to do it. And even in its imperfection, even though it's not polished, I'm just going to do it. And then it's the process of doing it that begins to perfect it, well, and then I learn better, and then I find out what I need to find out. And sometimes it's not even really about doing this show. It's about the process that, for whatever reason, I need to go through to become the person I'm supposed to become.
Well, and Chris said something when I came here, and she said, knowing so often in bigger districts, and there's so many layers of bureaucracy, and there's just so many people that you report to, which I get. There's a good reasons for that. There really
absolutely.
But she
hierarchy
said,
is important,
But what I'm excited about you bringing to the district is that you're coming from a place where there's only elementary school principal. There's no other elementary schools. There's only one superintendent who's super busy, and so you just have to make a decision, and you just have to figure it out. There's nothing under here that's gonna guide you. You just have to figure it out, and often on the fly. And so when I've come here, it's been this balance of there is a lot of layers, and you're expected. This is for principals. It's a lot of work in this district. There's a lot of expectations, and I'm up for it, but it can be very difficult. But for me, coming here has been melding that, how do you meet the demands and the expectations, but also just make decisions and just my boss, Cindy's always just go with the goers and just do it. Go for it. And if it fails, you learn in that process. And it's just in a lot of ways that connection to running, you plan and train and you have all these things and you're following a plan and at some point you just got to go and you just got to do it. And you'll learn a lot from that.
Absolutely. I've always been a planner.
Yeah.
That is, you said you kind of not, but in some ways, but I've always wanted to have a plan. I've had to come to a point in my life where it's it's fine, have a plan, but I'm not connected to it too deeply. I'm not holding on to that thing too much. Because so many better things than what I could have planned comes out of the doing. When you get into it, you're like, well, I don't know what I don't know what the end of this is going to be. But I think I need to do it. I think it's going to lead somewhere. And ultimately, you get to a place you look back and go, wow, I couldn't have planned this, but it's amazing what we've done.
Well, and if you look at whether it is the running and the health of your community, like the physical health, or you're just talking about education, I mean, to hear the statistics of the health of students in Solano County, or to look at some of the, ed data, not just here, but and not just in my school or our district or our county, but just across, like, it really is going to take people just going, and we got to do something. And kind of some of the things we've been doing, and that are, well packaged and well planned, and I mean, there's no substitute for those things, but at some point it's going to have to be so big and so great and so exciting, engaging, that you just have to go for it. Because I think you kind of just, whether it is the running, you just kind of get stuck in, well, this is what just go and do it. And that's, I think, where some of those amazing changes in our, in our personal lives and for our students are really going to take place. I don't know.
What do you think? I'm very focused right now on long-term what I think needs to change in education in general in this country. And my feeling is the best way to do that is to do that as much as you can in a microcosm. Do it small, prove that it works, and then show. Hey, look, we're doing it in this district and it's working. There's a lot of forces working against change in our system. What's one or two things that you think needs to change in the system of education that we're in? Not necessarily in our school or district, in your school or in our district, but in general in education. What's something you think needs to change?
I think, and we're trying to head this way, and we're trying to do it in a system that I think maybe holds it back sometimes, or doesn't. It almost becomes too systematic and not. I don't know kind of how I'm saying, but you really have to address the whole child. And so we have kids that are coming to us, and I think traditionally they're coming in and we're going to teach them these spelling words, or we're going to teach them how to read this way, and we're going to teach them how to do math this way. But really, they're coming with so many different needs and challenges, is that you really have to, as a school, kind of have to address all of those, and not in the sense of taking over for a parent. And I don't propose that schools should kind of take over for that, but really we have to really make a well-rounded child. How do we get our kids just in the traditional, like, math, arithmetic, reading, writing, so on and so forth, but how do we make them so they're good collaborators? How do we make them so that they're good communicators? Just kind of that well-rounded, like they know how to work with each other, how to exist in the world, and you have to do that. And I think we're trying, but we're trying to do it in kind of the old system, and so it's really slowing that down, and it almost harms creativity. And so some of the best teachers I know are kind of like, they're working in their classroom, and I've given them permission to really be creative as possible, and they're not radical in that they're really off the rails, but they're taking what we're giving them as a school district. They're taking what maybe they're getting on Twitter. They're spending a lot of time creating, but they're creating these little labs, like you said, of greatness. And I have them on my campus, and they're really constantly thinking, how do I make this better for all of my kids? How do I take the resources? And so we have to take those people, and like I think you said it, we really have to see what outcomes they're producing in their classroom and then just replicate that, because they exist. They're there, and how do we not stifle them with the system, and how do we really, and they're really looking at the whole child, well-rounded across the board, and not just, not just a test score.
Right.
And those things are there, and I get why they're important. You got to have some measure somewhere, but I think you just have to incubate those great classrooms, and then take them and expand them, and highlight those practices, even if they don't fit in the mold of what a school district or administrator is technically asking for. And like, are you meeting all the check boxes? But really, the check boxes should be, are we really creating well-rounded children when they leave?
Yeah, and I think there's a disconnect right now between our standard systems of accountability, right? If you look at the state level, especially, right? So, I think in the last few years, it's actually gotten better.
It has, yes.
Definitely, because they're starting to expand the number of data points that they use.
Absolutely.
To say this is a school's doing okay or a district's doing okay, we're good. And that's movement in the right direction. Right. So I'll give the state props for that.
Right.
Still, it's. I think there's a disconnect between the things that we inherently know that kids need to be able to do and demonstrate from an outcome standpoint, and what we're even able to measure. Right. Number one, in any standardized way, and what our state. Up to the federal, down to the local level, in many ways, is prepared to allow as a measurement. Right. I mean, all of this is political. Right. And people want to. There's a push and pull that's happening all the time between the want to allow creativity in schools, allow the staff to be creative in the way that they teach students and the way that students learn. And this want to have accountability, set hard accountability that says schools are doing it or they're not, right? And if they're not, then something needs to be done, right?
Well, and that was teachers in both schools that I've been in as an elementary school principal are just fantastic. Fantastic. It really, but if really great instructors. And really doing amazing things, most of them in their classrooms. And then you look at the student test scores and the outcomes. Yeah. And it and a school, and then the measures that come with it, and what those teachers are then made out to be, and those principals, and versus a school where for many different reasons the outcomes are different. Many of those outcomes are out of the control of the people that are working there. Right. And the instruction and the community and the collaboration that's going on in those is fantastic. But those hard accountability measures that have traditionally been used don't always show that, and that's really sad.
They don't. Yeah, I question. I'm getting to the point where I question whether or not. When somebody asks the question, are students achieving? In my experience in the state of California, what people are thinking is, do they do well on math and language arts test scores? Right. And yet, I would say that that definition of achievement doesn't have much of a place in society beyond schools. Right, and that's where I'm concerned. It's like, that's what I really kind of grieve over this all the time. I'm thinking, how does it change? I'm not even quite sure, but I have some ideas. But it's a big, complicated, nuanced thing.
But it's also hard too from a standpoint of sense tells you it shouldn't your achievement on a basic. It's not basic, pretty hard actually, but a standardized test of English and math, those seem so straightforward, and I mean that's such a basic measure, as a system, as schools or whatever, at minimum we should get students to be able to achieve all right on these. Shouldn't that be a basic level of expectation? Sure, it should be. Sure,
but I think what's happening, what's disturbing, is that whenever there's this almost weird political game that gets played. Whenever politicians work with their constituencies to make accountability processes or accountability tests or ways of saying this is something, and they do those things, I think, with for the most part with good intentions, right?
Hopefully.
Well, you hope, but I think it's reasonable to say, I think a normal person would say it's reasonable to say there should be accountability, and it's reasonable to say that math is really important, and that kids should learn over grade levels, different levels of math, and they should be able to demonstrate that they know it, right? And same thing with language, and that those two things are really, really core and really important to being able to think and do in ways that are important. It all makes sense, right? And what happens though is when you set that accountability piece, and then you put consequences behind it, which is what you do. If you don't reach these levels, there are consequences, that sort of thing. Then what happens inevitably every time that happens at the governmental level? What happens in the organizations that teach students is a laser focus goes on what is the most efficient way to get to that. Right? And a lot of other things that are really important in education start going out the window. And so the promise of assessment is really important. Using data to point out things that you who are teaching wouldn't otherwise see is really, really important. I believe that. A lot of my career is based on that, coming from technology, is based on being able to provide data that helps leaders and teachers look at it and go, oh, I didn't notice that trend. That might be something I need to adjust. Right? That's really important. It's important business. But there's this weird thing that happens whenever you simplify your accountability measure down to something like a test score. And that weird thing is that it's all a game, and people try to game the system. So they figure out, and principals try to figure out, all right, if this is what I'm being graded on, and superintendent's the same way, board's the same way. If we've all reinforced, our communities have reinforced that that's what I'm looking at. The community has said that's what I'm looking at when I move into this area. I'm looking at test scores for that school. I'm going to move to this area because I'm going to go to the school that has the highest test scores. And yet we know, working in education, that that's like a tiny sliver of what we're doing in schools and what we believe to be important for kids in schools. And the other 90% or more of things that we're doing that aren't reflected through test scores that we believe are really, really important for students to know and learn and be able to do are difficult to assess and show that you're doing well. And they're difficult to expose, and they change based on the community that you're in.
And I would say that what I hear most from teachers is, as you talk about the importance of those other things, because they know that those are hard to measure, and because they've been trained and conditioned in a sense that those two things that are going to be tested are of primary importance, they tend to really struggle with finding time for those other things.
That's right.
And believing in them. And rightfully so.
Absolutely.
If I say we really want to work on the social emotional aspect of what kids, because even if we look at it from a purely, we're going to work on these so they can do better on these tests, it's hard to do it because
in every school district that I've been, that dichotomy exists. You have that situation where there's conversation, there's even from leadership. For leadership may have a really strong vision, and our district does have a really strong vision around theme-based types of academics, theme-based schools, CTE, getting kids to be able to do things in school rather than just academics, but be able to apply the academics to things that they're interested in, passionate about, that are relevant to the world outside of school. We talk about these things all the time. But in practice, they are in competition with a laser focus on the hardcore assessment results that we feel that we have to produce.
Right.
And what's interesting, and it creates this sort of dichotomy in leadership that I've seen over and over again, right? People, so the people in the organization are like, I'm hearing this, but I'm seeing and I'm feeling this. Right. I'm hearing, give kids opportunities to do. Give kids opportunities to do individual passionate things. Give them playtime. Give them time to explore. Let them do projects. But then what I'm feeling and I'm seeing is the effects of every year when we see that our test scores haven't gone up, there's huge disappointment.
Right. And a series of, these are the things we'll be doing to address that.
And these are the things that we'll be doing. Oh, and by the way, we still really want you to give kids freedom to.
Right.
And it's like,
absolutely.
Yeah, I kind of have to choose. I feel like I have to prioritize one over the other, and there's more icky feelings coming from this assessment thing. And I'm not downing assessment. Do not get me wrong. I'm not downing assessment. Because if I'm downing anything, I'm downing testing. And I think they're two different things. Assessment is a necessary thing that we all do. We do it in our jobs. We assess whether or not we're doing a good job. But when you look at the working world, you rarely ever see written tests.
Right.
What you see is an assessment of performance and projects.
Right.
Our outcomes are the thing we produced.
Right.
And how did that go?
Well, and I would say that the classrooms, even when you look at the old testing model, and then you look at the new ones, and this is so hard for people to see the connection, but the classrooms that I find that end up doing the best on those tests consistently are the ones that are placing an emphasis on creating well-rounded children and are putting the time into that. That they're really looking at, how do I make this a safe, engaging classroom, and not just focused on this laser-like focus on, am I preparing you for this assessment? But I'm really trying to create great writers, great thinkers, great, technology, great technology foundations, kids that care about each other, kids that can talk to each other. Those classes that are rich in those things end up doing the best on those assessments. Those are the classrooms, and So it's hard, but it's hard, right? Because I just don't feel like they're always, that those places are not, it's not celebrated, and people are not necessarily always seeing that connection.
Well, I'll tell you this: I know that those things are celebrated when people come in and see it.
Right.
Right.
Right, you're right about that.
Our superintendent,
absolutely,
our assistant superintendents, our directors, they do a good job of getting out there.
And when they're there, like if they walk through,
and they see things that are they do encourage them. They're like, oh my gosh, this is really great.
And what I would say when they walk through, typically and not just this district, but many, there's fear in that. But when they come through and kind of debrief on what they saw, they're so excited when kids are having fun and they're engaged and they're excited and the conversations are rich and kids are moving. And that doesn't always look like we have, this product, that we're using, but it's actually kids engaged and working. And that I feel like, you're right. They do a good job of celebrating and pointing that out.
Right. It is because it's because those leaders genuinely want to see those behaviors in the classroom.
But I would ask, why is that conversation or that message so muddled? Because if I talk to teachers, they're so scared when Chris is coming down, or even when I'm coming in the classroom, or Cindy's going to come by, or another teacher from another school comes. They're so nervous, and they have in their mind, this message has been, you better use this product and follow this exact script. And then that's not the conversation I've tried to communicate. It's not the conversation that I think but that is, there's just that fear that I've got to have this, I have to have this done, and I have to do it exactly step by step from the book.
Right.
And so why is there such a disconnect?
It's interesting.
Is it historical? I don't know.
I think it's cultural in education in the United States. There's a lot of ties into that have, like I had mentioned before. There's these forces that are sort of holding education in place,
right,
and not allowing it to break free and open into new pieces, new areas. And to even follow the research that's clearly out there about brain science and how we think and how we learn. That's really some of the practices we have in education are very counter to that in the United States. It's funny. I have a friend who went over to Finland for 3 weeks to tour schools. And in talking to them, they do some things very differently, and they're changing some things right now.
You just talking about that on Twitter, weren't you?
I was.
I saw that.
Yeah, and it reminded me of that. That they were talking about interdisciplinary work and really getting rid of subjects where you're okay. We're going to work for 45 minutes on math now, and now we're going to work for an hour on English.
No subjects.
Right? No subjects. I mean, they're there. But it's all through the lens of projects, right? And it's all through the lens of let's do something. And along the way, we know that we're going to have to learn these things in order to do the project well, right? Which is how we work in everywhere else except for schools. Right? And that's kind of, I'm just saying. And that's the direction that they're going. And actually, they're shimmying down the amount of time that they're in classrooms in Scandinavia, spending more time in play. Especially at the younger ages than we do. And what was interesting was my friend made a point to ask, like, where are you getting these ideas? Why are you making these changes? What research? And they said, all the research is from scientists in the United States. It's like, God.
Well, and what I always hear, especially teachers like go to other schools, or they look at studies from other schools, states, or countries. They say, well, those aren't our kids. So it's interesting, but it's like you said, what's interesting about that is that it's scientists in the United States.
Right.
Probably studying kids across a wide cross-section, not kids in this community or that community.
Yeah, and we're talking about brain science, neuroscience, how human beings learn in general, regardless of culture or background and that sort of thing. Those are the things that are being studied at quite a clip these days, and they're coming up with all kinds of interesting information that should inform our learning processes in schools. The problem is, if you watch any videos by, like Sir Ken Robinson, you'll see he really attacks that, the school structure in the United States. And talks about grade levels and how that's problematic for today's learning, and you look at getting kids in the zone of proximal development, and how you get them there, how you keep them there a lot of the time, and how the kids' zones are not by grade level, all of these different kinds of things. And how our school system is set up from an industrial point of view.
Right.
So it's really about training people to be able to follow directions and work in factories in the 1800s.
You're working in that system, right? So I think we must have watched a video together, administration-wise. I don't know if it was Edwin that showed that or
it was
someone.
Edwin.
But then that system, this kind of traditional system, is looking at that and then trying to change that using the same methods they've used for so long, and and then wondering why it doesn't really actually change, and that's really frustrating.
It is. I read a book. I listened to a book, I should say. I listened to a book. I hardly ever read books these days, but I listened to a book called Dumbing Us Down.
Yeah,
have you heard of this?
No, I've heard of it, and I saw that you were reading it, but I haven't. Yeah.
Just shattered me.
Yeah.
But
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. Another took the red pill, followed John Krupa down that hole, and came out the other side a changed person. Right. I was shook, as my children would say. But it's written by this teacher who's now retired and didn't write the book until he was retired.
Of course,
couldn't do it while he was still working. But two-time teacher of the year in New York City. Pretty sharp guy.
Right.
And has all of these, really goes over some of the concepts, the ideas of, stepping out of the school system and looking at what he was doing, what the school system does, and really, what we as school employees are almost implicit in doing it without knowing, sort of reinforcing some of these old ideas and things.
Well, and there's principals in the district that I think have they've tried to buck that, and they've tried to say, no, I'm gonna do it differently.
Yeah, it's challenging.
It is very challenging,
and
it beats you down.
Absolutely,
it does. And so
it really does. It really does.
The system, if you're gonna work in it, then you also have to understand it can only take so much shock and change at once. And how do you? It's that difficult balance of, start and go, or stop and go, and stop and go, and stop and go, and
the enforcement of it of the whole system is circular, right. So you're like, well, what the question is, if a principal can't easily make that change at the school level, then who has the authority to do that? Well, your obvious thought is superintendent, right? So the superintendent can make a decree at the district level and say,
we're going to do this.
This is what we're going to do, and we're going to minimize the need to worry about whether or not we do well on math and English language arts assessment test scores at the state level, for the purpose of, I think that a lot of people look at it this way, and I think you mentioned it a little bit, that the theory is that if you do all of these core, really great instructional things that don't seem to directly have much to do with preparing kids for tests, that if you do that well and you create a culture that does that well at a school, that over time you're going to get to the point where you're going to have kids who do well on the tests, right? Just as a side effect. The fact that they're good thinkers and that they understand how to solve problems and do these things. I'm not sure that theory is borne out yet, because I'm not sure the tests really do show that that kind of learning. Maybe it's possible, but I don't know that for sure. And a lot of people hold on to that belief, and maybe it's a good belief to have, especially at this point in time. But even if you do believe that, then what you'd have to do is you'd have to clear the way as a leader in a school district. You'd have to be able to say, okay, we're going to not worry about test scores for at least 5 years.
To see if it really had an impact.
And just focus on creating this environment at the schools.
So, I would say this, that creating that environment, even if you were to say to people, here's my Friday letter, we're going to let that go, and it's
more than that.
It is.
Right, because it's enforced on a number of different levels, right? Even the superintendent of any school district must answer to the board.
Right.
I think even if you answers to the community,
even if you put all that aside, let's say all those things were aligned and all those people agreed that it was okay, I just think the practice in the classroom, but teaching is such a personal, it's just such a personal kind of craft, and I don't know, and it's hard to find people that are really dedicated to that craft. But I don't even know that within that classroom, that with the teachers that we have, some really truly do not believe that really not attacking is not the word, but really looking at students in the whole system, or kind of a well-rounded child, is the way to go.
Right.
Even if they don't care about test scores,
you're right.
They just don't see it that way, and so
it's so much more complicated than just saying, well, the leadership won't let us do it.
Right.
Because that assumes that, like you said, that everybody in the teaching level of education is like ready to go with that kind of a change, and the reality is that many of them believe that what they're doing is the appropriate and
right
so
then that kind of goes to what you're saying just about grade levels and about even classroom walls, is that you have, I think most people, the vast majority of people that are in teaching they're talented and their talents rest in different places. Mm-hmm. And so how do you as an organization better can you expect that each teacher in those four walls will be really talented, and can you really get to a point where they'd be really talented with developing social emotional, developing well-rounded kids that are well-behaved, and get the academic piece on this? They're not. And so how do you reorganize your system and your organization so that a teacher that maybe has been teaching second grade because that's her job, but is really good at science and science projects allow her to thrive and work with all kinds of kids. And one that's really good with dealing with students that have trauma and having them in a classroom and supporting them in the classroom environment, allow that person to do that outside of just their classroom. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think you've hit when you talk about grade levels. That's one thing that's really easy to say.
Right.
Goodness, if we blew grade levels apart at this point on multiple levels, people would not.
It's funny. There are principals in this district that have, in small ways, done even a little bit of that work. Just to say we are not gonna just on the fly create a 4 or 5 or a K1. We're gonna purposely do that. Mm-hmm. It's within a system, but it's born out of what we're doing. K1, 2, 3, 4 is not working, and so how do we change that in the little ways that are possible? Mm-hmm. But you said it may take 5 years to see if that's really having an impact.
Right,
that's scary.
Work. It's really,
and that's scary because that's kids' lives.
Yeah, and when you talk about a lot of these things are things that the schedules and all those things aren't things that necessarily help kids learn, but they certainly help adults manage. Right? And that's we compete with that a lot.
And it gets such a bad name, the management of adults managing, and yes, obviously all of it should be focused on what's best for kids, but it is hard. You got to come to work, and there's 6,000 or 3,000 kids at a school at some point.
And you talked about the curriculum.
Yeah.
We talked about how there's that push and pull. It's like, I can tell you at the district level, there's this real clear want, to when the district spends multi-millions of dollars on a new,
you better be using it
on a new curriculum.
Right.
That by the way, the district didn't choose. It was a committee of people, including teachers, that chose that curriculum. Right. There's that comes across when we talk about walking through classrooms and seeing something from 15 years ago still being used, and the new stuff's not being used at all. And yet at the same time, I feel like the focus on all of that stuff is sometimes misplaced. Right. But when you put a huge investment into something, there's going to be a magnet towards using it and exclusively.
Right.
And it's tough, man. It's all nuanced. It's very complicated.
It is, and in 9 years, 9th year is 10th year is a admin of some sort. It's been a hard lesson to realize that, and as you go up, this becomes more intense, that the message you give, you could say, yeah, we really want you to use this adoption. And then you could say behind that, but we want you to be innovative with it. But the message is we really need to use this adoption. And the piece on being innovative with it and being able to supplement and use, that's lost.
Yeah.
And then as you get up the levels, that message is just more hard and fast. And so you might take something like, we really want to place an emphasis on teachers coming to school, and that we want great attendance for teachers. And then that message is totally lost. And it just, as you move up, and we bring it all the way around back to Twitter and media, and it's just, you get these small clips. And that's all that people hear, and not really not really hear the whole message,
Right.
and think about humans, and have conversations, but instead it's just a small little snippet, and that's the message, and then the rest is lost. And it's been hard, just think about leadership. That as you go up that stairwell and that staircase to higher levels, whether it's a superintendent or board, or you just sometimes the humanization of it is all of it is lost, and you have to be really nuanced in your message and careful with it, and that's hard.
And consistent.
But it's hard work. And made easier by getting out, and having those conversations, building the relationships. Then people really understand where you're coming from. So,
and they believe that your intentions are good. I think that's important, and that takes time. It takes reality. You have to really be there. It's hard. This business of education is very, very messy.
Yeah, it really is. So is running. So is all of it: the parenting, the teaching, the health, all of it. It is. But
it is also core to who we are, what we do in communities. It's interesting. One of the things that in the Dumbing Us Down book said that kind of blew my mind. And I haven't really looked in to see, is this really true? Is the opinion of the person who wrote the book, but one of the things that he said was that in Massachusetts, where our form of compulsory education began in the United States, that before compulsory education, that 98% of the people in Massachusetts were literate and could read and write.
Before that.
Before.
Oh, that is interesting.
And that since they've pretty much hovered around 91%.
It is interesting if you really went back and looked at that. I really want to know if that's true.
It's like, yeah, I would like to know if that's true and how those numbers were got, because I listened to it. I'm sure if I had the book, there would be some references to where those numbers, where they came up with those.
Two things to that. One, I mean, I also get the sentiment they're trying to
right,
apply,
is that maybe compulsory education isn't as important to reading and writing and arithmetic as we think it is, and that his point was that kids or people, little humans, will learn those things as the necessity arises. And that they'll learn it fairly easily. He kept throwing out the number that learning to read and write only takes between 100 and 150 hours concentrated if you have a reason and a want to do it, especially if you're younger. And so, what his point is before compulsory education, some kids learned how to read and write when they were 6 and some when they were 13 or 14. But as long as they did it when they were ready and when they wanted to, and they had a need to, they were interested. It didn't take them that long to do it. And then now, we try to get them all to read by a certain age, in a certain way, and then wonder why some kids struggle with it, and others don't.
But it's this balance, right? I mean, because if you think about that, just from preparing all children to be successful and how politics play out and culture plays out, if you don't have that system in place, who's finding access and learning to read and write at a certain age and going a certain path, and others aren't. It's always there. But
I don't think his point was to say that we don't need school. But his point was more to say that to say that the grade level thing is a bit bogus, and that it may be that kids need to learn at different times.
And we do find that a lot in school, that there's such an emphasis, and I get it, standards-based education, and these cut points, they got to be here by this point. I mean, I think my own daughter, my 10-year-old, I mean, she She just developed it. I mean, you just think about your own children and by comparing them,
or yourself,
right? And they just develop at different rates.
Yeah,
you know.
And I think we have to be really careful. And I think our school district does a pretty good job of this. And we've been moving in a good direction. But we have to be careful to make sure that that our school sort of culture doesn't sort of say to kids that if they don't learn something by this time, or that they haven't, that they do struggle with this, that you're a bad student, or you're a bad kid, or that you're not going to be successful in the world. Because we see the reverse of that all the time in real life. We see kids who do terrible in school. And then they find their passion or their interest or where their genius is outside of school, and they do very well in the world outside of school.
Well, and what you tend to find too, and I found it certainly teaching high school, is that there's a lot of kind of top-down blame. So the high school teachers asking middle school what were you doing with these kids in middle school, elementary school kids, what were you doing with these kids? But in reality is, now being at the elementary school, I feel like we really are sending off. The vast majority of kids are leaving pretty prepared, test or not. Like, they are making growth. They have a base. And this might be a whole nother, I could think of a few guests that could come here to speak with you, but what's going on when they're going there? What is happening to large numbers of our children that are finding, relative success at the elementary level, and then just kind of fall apart?
Yeah, absolutely.
And relating to that book, is it something about brain science and development where maybe that's...
I think that could be a part of it, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you see it in test scores. You see it in a number of different data that we track, that sort of downward curve that happens typically at sixth grade. Right. And starts happening there. And then, everybody thinks of puberty, right? Right. Which, that's a difficult time in life. And so that's probably got something to do with it for a lot of kids. And they're also getting to an age at that point in usually in the junior high age, where they're really becoming aware of, and maybe this partly is puberty, they're becoming aware of some of their own wants and their own interests, and that those are diverging from what they're fed at school. Right. And so I think that's a part of it. I know in high school that's definitely a part of it, where kids, some brilliant kids, and all kids are brilliant in some way, I believe. Right. They all have their own genius in some way. They have something they're good at, or something they're interested in. But many, many students we lose in high school because they just lose interest, because they have difficulty finding anything at school that really feeds that interest or that genius that they have. Because we can't necessarily, in a structure, we can't do it all for everybody. No. But I think so. I think that's part of it. I mean, that also tends to be the time that when they go from elementary to middle school, that they end up having 6 or 7 teachers instead of just 1 or 2. Right. Also, parents tend to start pulling away from their involvement in school, in junior high and high school.
All those factors, and it's just even accounts, even schools that account for those and try to address them, it's still really hard.
It's still really hard. Yeah. So it's again nuanced, complicated. There's so much involved in it. I'm a big fan of finding ways to pique kids' interest. I think that's one of the keys to it. To me, it's funny. One of the things that has come up in research before, and I think probably almost every educator knows it, is the three R's, right? What is it?
Reading, arithmetic.
No. The other R's. Gosh, why am I blanking?
Relevant.
Right. It's
sorry, guys.
You got it. It's relevance. Relationships. Yep. And rigor. Yeah. Right. And so So relationships, relevance, and rigor. Right. I would put it in that order: relationships, relevance, and rigor. Right. And to me, it's interesting as I'm involved in schools and I watch schools, and what happens is, so often, to me, the natural order of things for human beings is that you start with a relationship and you build trust, right? And once you've got a relationship established and there's some trust there, then you have, if you're going to deliver something new to the person, that they might learn, it has to be relevant to their lives. It has to be something that they can go, yeah, I need to learn this. Or I want to learn this. I'm interested in this. Or this is going to have something really important to do with my life. So you have the relationship, you establish the relationship, you bring relevance in the thing that you're supposed to learn. And if you nail those two things, the rigor just happens automatically because the rigor is where the student really wants to go deep.
Do you feel like schools are kind of doing that backwards?
Absolutely. So often, to me, it's just like what I said before with test scores, is we always want one of the outcomes is test scores. When we find out that, man, that's where the rubber meets the road, we want to go like, all right, fast. How do I get there as quickly as possible and as easily as possible? But the reality is there is no quick or easy way to that. Right? The idea is you have to start with relationships, and then you have to make sure that what they're learning is relevant. And if you do those things, the rigor will come, and they should be able to succeed in any number of measures that we would use to say they're succeeding. Right? And so often we jump to the rigor. We go, okay, well, relationships, that, hi, I'm Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, right? Here's my rules for the classroom, right? But relationships are messy and hard. And when you have 30 kids to deal with at an elementary level or more, or you've got, 70 or 170 at the high school level, relationships are an elusive, real relationships are an elusive thing. They're very difficult to form without spending real serious time in the classroom focused on that, not on a content standard, but on the relationship.
And that's scary,
right?
Because you are expected,
right?
It's just,
exactly. And then the relevance is then another piece that's scary to people. They're like, well, okay, I've been a teacher all my life. I've actually never had any other job than being a teacher. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure that I can. It's difficult for me to find out that kid A is interested in this sort of thing, and I know nothing about it as a teacher. How do I connect that and make this thing I'm trying to teach them relevant to the thing they're interested in? That's difficult as well. What's easier for a teacher is to introduce rigor.
Real quick.
We can get trained. We can sit down and get trained and go through things. How do we get into the deeper levels of
running joke with friends that I used to teach high school with? There was a certain period at the school where that word was like every staff meeting, every night, rigor. It's like, so finally they move past it. They're like just so excited. It's like they never want to hear that word ever again.
No,
I will do anything with that.
No, and that's my theory. I don't know that if that's true. I'm not a scientist. I haven't done the research. But my theory is that in order for rigor to be successful, you've got to have the relationships and the relevance first, and the rigor.
And I think everyone will tell you that
becomes that.
But it's just hard with the tests.
It's hard.
Feel like this is
hard.
it.
What's the most direct, efficient way to get to?
I think some people are not good. I mean, I take it for granted. You probably take it for granted that you're just good at building relationships, and some people are just not good at that.
Oh no, absolutely not. But it's hard.
But there's only so many teachers to go around, and you have to foster that and try to build it and try to train it up. But so much of that is just you either you have it or you don't. And that's scary. It's just hard to get people in the classrooms already, and
I almost wonder what it would be like to institute a thing that says, okay, no content curriculum in the first month of school. The first month of school, we're doing nothing but activities that build relationships.
Start smart.
Yeah. Go slow to go fast.
Yeah.
That sort of concept. Because if you see successful people, teachers who've gone into situations where things are really bad, like in a school that's really low performing, where kids have issues, and we have pockets everywhere that are like this, but where kids are dealing with issues that are so much more serious outside of school than anything we can present to them in school. Their focus is just not on school at all. You see the people who've been successful. If you've ever read the book or seen the movie Freedom Writers,
yep.
Right, good example. Right. What did she do?
Right.
She focused on relationships. She went to kids' houses, right? She made relationships with the parents.
That happened last year. I mean, I had a teacher. She hadn't even really, in the formal sense, she didn't have a credential yet, but so good at relationships. She came in November after just a horrible experience of taking kids out of classes they were in, putting them in a split class, giving them a teacher that, God bless her, but just really wasn't prepared for this and ended up leaving them. So in a pinch, she agreed to take this on and took this class of kids that just were not happy at all. It was ugly, and turned them around. And really, because they knew that no matter what she threw at them, that she cared about them, loved them, would support them. I mean, she, to the point where she was counseling parents and working with parents on relationships but that's just who she was. And in the interview, sorry HR, we talk about the interview, but in the interview, and she'll tell you this, like, I didn't know all the questions about the adoption or whatever, but I know kids and I know relationships, and I know that I can come into this situation and the rest I can learn on the fly. And it did. And her scores were comparable or better than some of the other classes because those kids were willing to come to work for her.
Right. And that's the core. That's what I think. When people come, when anybody, I'm to get out of the classroom, right? When anybody comes at you with something really rigorous, right, without establishing some sort of trusting relationship or making what is coming at you relevant to something you care about, your natural reaction is like, no, thank you. Right. I'm good. Not good. Don't need that. That's hard. Right. But if you establish that relationship and then you show the relevance of the relationship and what you're trying to achieve to their lives and to what they're interested in, then they naturally want to become rigorous in what they're doing. They want to go deep. Right. It's just hard work. It's like you said, hard so work. Nuanced. I just wonder, like, how do schools create space to really do those things? And the reverse is the fear that if you create that kind of space, will people be responsible with that space I think, and do what they should do? Right. I think right. But I think if you look at, and the superintendent talked about it. They've tried so many different things, but in general, if you look at the data sheets she was pulling out of file cabinets to the ones now, is it truly having a long-term impact? I think we are in this district impacting kids in a very positive way, and you see kids going on to do great things, and I think you have a healthy community here. But in terms of those measures that we are measured by, that hasn't moved. It hasn't moved much, and so, and the gap, the achievement gap isn't really, in those traditional measures, it's not shrinking. And so, I don't know. It's hard work. It is, and sometimes you get the sense that you're kind of shooting arrows into the bullseye of the wrong target. Right. When school is at 1 year, I know it, and I feel the pain of principals. You're all blue or all green on the dashboard. You felt like you made great growth, and then next year it's different. Right. And you didn't really change your practice. You just didn't continue to improve your practice. Right. And the kids didn't change that much. Yeah. And so what? And then you're just looking. What is it? I don't. That's so frustrating. It is frustrating, and it in many ways it's not authentic to the world that we live in. It's not at all, around, right. and I think that's something a lot of people really struggle with, and it's a big challenge. Right. So hey, you know what? We are so over time. Are we really? Yeah, we are. Yeah. But that's what happens. That's what happens in this podcast. Yeah. And it's conversations that I just really enjoy. One thing I wanted to kind of mention is just that the thing that developed last week at the end of my podcast about me being tased to raise money. So I was at my Rotary meeting today. I announced what happened. Some of the people had watched that, knew what was coming, and I set the bar. I will get tased at the point where I have.
Not getting tased.
He's not getting tased. I will get tased at the point where I have raised $1,000.
Okay.
For our Fairfield Suisun Rotary project, which is to get a year subscription of National Geographic Kids for all third graders in the Fairfield Suisun Unified School District.
All right.
So once I get to $1,000, then I will set that up and we will get that done on camera. So
I will make it my personal life goal to make sure we get $1,000.
Oh, it's not going to be a problem, my friend. At the Fairfield Suisun Rotary Club today, we raised $500 just today.
We're good.
And I'm pretty sure I'm going to come back because Troy Oviatt brought that whole thing up.
Yeah.
And really trapped me into this whole charade that, by the way, got me into a lot of trouble with my wife too. By the way,
fantastic.
For promising that before I consulted her. So I am holding Troy Oviatt publicly to the $300 that he promised.
I'm down.
Because he said, would you do it for $300? I'm like, yeah, maybe I would. He goes, I would do it, and I will personally do it. So Troy, you owe $300 to the cause. And I expect that to come.
And I will make sure that we get past the extra $500. So we'll be good.
Absolutely,
we'll be good.
So we're getting there. And as for that, I think this is it. We are, I don't know, about an hour and 25 minutes in.
That's fantastic. Hey,
thank you so much.
Thank you, brother.
I really appreciate your help with this and being willing to do it.
Anytime.
And hopefully it's a good story.
I don't think people want to hear me for another hour and a half with you, but that's all right.
Probably not. They don't want to hear me. Yeah. They come back for the different people every time.
Right. And the taste.
I need to shut up a little bit more. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you later.
Right on.